In the last video, we added a bit of polish to our app by adding this empty state for when our order was empty. But up until now, we've been faking our order, right, with some mock data. Well, in this video, we're going to create our order object that's going to go into the environment, new topic, brace yourselves. That way multiple screens can access it. For example, we add to our order from the appetizer list view, more specifically the detail screen, and then we want whatever we added to show up on our order screen, and then we can also remove items from that array on our order screen. So the main topic of this video is creating that order object and then using the environment. Now, before I explain the environment, let's actually create that order object. So in our model, do Command N for a new file. It is a Swift file, hit next, and we're going to call it order. And it's going to be very similar to our view models. So the difference between view model and the environment, like overall the concept is kind of the same. However, our view model is very tightly coupled with a specific view. Whereas an environment object isn't attached to a single view. Like I said, multiple views can access it depending on where you set it up. More on that later. I don't want to get ahead of myself. Anyway, back to this order object. So we do want to import Swift UI. And like I said, this setup is going to be very similar to how we set up our view models. Make my font a little bigger. I noticed in editing, my font was kind of small sometimes. Anyway, final class order, and it is an observable object. Again, this is the same setup as a view model, because again, the concept is the same. We want a published property on this, and we want to have an array of appetizers, right? That's the items on the order, right? If we're adding multiple appetizers, we're very hungry, we need an array of appetizers. So let's do @published. So again, this should look very, very similar to a view model. Var items, and items is an array of appetizers. And we're going to initialize that with an empty array, right? Because when we fire up our app, we have no orders. So again, the setup is like exactly like a view model for this part of it. However, here's where it is different. Now that we have our order object, we need to inject it into the environment somewhere. And here's why the somewhere matters. That's how you dictate what has access to your environment object. Think of all the views like downstream, or all the child views are the ones that are going to have access to our environment object. So pulling up this little visual here, in our example, our app is kind of laid out like this, right? We have our tab view, and things like the appetizer list view, the account view, and the order view are all children of that tab view. Back to the code, let's look at that. Go to screens, scroll up, appetizer tab view, get rid of our preview, we don't need that. Look, see our tab view, or appetizer tab view, I'm sorry, is the name of the view. And you can see the appetizer list view, the account view, order view, etc. are all children of our tab view. So if we put our order object into the environment at the appetizer tab view level, again, think of it as like flowing downstream, all the child views. So that means appetizer list view will get access to that environment object, account view will get access to it, order view will get access to it, and then all their child views, right? So when you inject something at like the very, very top level, you can consider that as like everything in the app is going to have access to that. Now, you may not always want that. In our case, we do, right? Because, our appetizer list view is going to change stuff in our order view is going to change stuff in our order. Our account view is not, but that's fine. But you can see how our entire app will have access. Now, when I mentioned that, you can give certain views access depending on where you inject it into the environment, well, we just gave the example of injecting it at like the top level. Well, let's say our account view, like our settings or whatever, was actually more complex. Like here's a visual example of the Apple settings. You can see as I'm going deeper into these settings, like I'm like 4 screens deep into my settings, or if you can imagine this is our account view. So if you can imagine injecting something just at the account view level into the environment, now our whole app doesn't have access to it, but all the settings child views, again, if we had a very complex setting setup like Apple does, all those child views, again, all the views downstream have access to that environment object, and that could be something like a settings environment object, right? So the main takeaway here is where you put your object in the environment matters, because only the child views of where you inject it are going to have access to it. So if you try to access something that's not in that view hierarchy, your app's going to crash. In the review section coming up later in the course, we're going to do a deeper dive into some more examples of that, but that is the overview. Let's get back to our example where we're injecting it at like the very top level of our app, so all of our views have access to it. So how do we do that, right? You may think do it in this appetizer tab view, but no, you want to go to our app lifecycle, actually, right? Remember this? We went over this, appetizer.app, because this is where we're first initializing our appetizer tab view. So when we initialize our tab view, we want to initialize it with an object in its environment, right? So again, the very, very top level. So we can do that by creating an order object on this app here, struct. So var order equals, and we're going to initialize a brand new order, right? And if we go back to our order, just to double check, right? We don't have an initializer. So when we create our order, it's basically just going to get created with an empty array of appetizers. So back to our app view here. So now we need to take this order that we created here and actually inject it into the appetizer tab view's environment. Now there is a modifier for this. We're just one line, so .EnvironmentObject here, and then we want to pass in the order that we created. So do Command B. There we go. So the order that we created here on line 13, we are injecting into the appetizer tab view's environment. So again, all the child views of the appetizer tab view are going to have access to this order object. So I just said they have access to it, but how? Well, let's go to our appetizer detail view. This is the first spot we want to use it, right? Because if I pull up the canvas, right, when we tap our add to order button, right, we want to add it to our order object. So here we are in our appetizer detail view. And in order to get access to that environment object, it's a property wrapper. At EnvironmentObject, there you go, var order, and it is of type order. Now, let's talk about this real quick because there's kind of a gotcha, right? We're not like setting this equal to anything. We don't have to initialize our appetizer detail view with it. You know, like for example, how we have just our appetizer, when we don't give it a value, you know, it's going to say, hey, add this to your preview, or you have to pass in a value. It won't let you do that. The environment object is different because it's assuming that because you did this, something is in the environment and it's just going to pull from it. So this is where your app will crash if you don't inject it into the environment properly, right? Like we said, only the child views have it. Good thing appetizer detail view is a child view of the app tab view because we put it at the top level. But if you were getting more specific with where you put your environment, this is where you got to be careful. Because again, if appetizer detail view was not in the view hierarchy of our tab view, this would crash because there's not going to be anything called order in the environment. Okay, luckily for us, there is. So now we have access to this order variable that we can use. So where do we want to use it? Well, we want to use it when we tap on the add to order button. So that is down here. Right now, we're just printing tapped. Well, let's do order. Well, we want to add the appetizer. So order has a variable called items, right? Just to verify that, let's go back to order. There you go. Yep, our variable called items is an array of appetizers. So we're going to append our appetizer to this items array. So .items.append, new element, and then we want to append the appetizer. And the appetizer we have is the appetizer we passed into this detail view, like from the very beginning, right? So we know we want to add that one to it. Now this is a fine line of code. It's not super hard to read. I don't know. I like to refactor this a little bit further. This is completely subjective. If you don't want to do this, don't worry about it. But I also like having, you know, functions on my order object here. So in order, I'm going to write a function. So we'll do func add, and then we won't give it a name, but we'll give it a argument label appetizer, and it is of type appetizer. And then here, I'm going to do items.append appetizer with whatever we pass in there. So again, this is just a very, very small refactor, but you'll see at the call site how it makes it a lot more readable, even though that line of code was fine, right? So, and real quick, you'll see why I'm not going to give it a name. If you don't want to give your functions like a parameter name, you use that underscore there, and then you can use this to use like within the scope. So you'll see why I did that here in a second, if you're not already familiar with this technique. So appetizer detail view, instead of order.items.append, you know, let's just do order.add, and you can see I get this. And here's the reason why I didn't name my parameter is because it tells me I need an appetizer of the type. So to me, that is letting the user of my code know, hey, it expects an appetizer, rather than just like naming the parameter appetizer and then passing in an appetizer. A little bit redundant. So here I can just type in appetizer. Right, so order.add appetizer. I like the way that reads. Just a small little side rant on, you know, refactoring in code style. Okay, so what's happening here, right? On our detail view, we are basically getting access to our order that's up in the environment, right? And the environment is kind of like global across our whole app. So we're getting access to that in our detail view. And then when we tap the button, that order that's up there in the environment, we're adding this appetizer to that order, right, in the items. So now that our order has the item, we need to read that item in our order view, right? So let's go to the order view, and I'll minimize all this stuff so my head's not in the way. Okay, let's hit resume here to see our order view. Cool. Here we can get rid of this mock data, right? We don't need this at state private var order items. Okay, what we need access to is our environment order that has items. So at EnvironmentObject var order of type order. Cool. So now anywhere I was using those order items, I can now do my order dot items, right? Because that's items is the array that's on my order object. So instead of order items, order dot items, and then same thing here. Cool. Do Command B. We should be good to go. Cool. So now that we're not using our mock data anymore, right? So this should be empty if my preview ever works. Okay, the preview hates me. That's fine. We'll use the simulator. But so now if you can see what's going on here, right? I'm getting access to the order that's up in the environment. In my table view, now I'm reading that order object in whatever array of appetizers is on there. That's what I'm going to show in my table view. Same thing for delete items, right? Delete items is going to remove items from the order.items, right? So we're just accessing that order, a little bit of refactoring thing. Same thing here. We're just checking if my order.items is empty before we show the empty state. So let's run this on the simulator and see if this works. Okay, here we are. We should see an empty state when we tap the order. There we go. Empty state. Home. Okay, let's add some. Let's add these stuffed shells. Again, these are my favorite on here, I think. Okay, add to order. Okay, we should probably dismiss this. So let's go back and update that later. But let's close this out. Our stuffed shells should be in our order. So let's click on order. Bam, stuffed shells. Nice. You'll notice our price isn't updating. We're gonna fix that in a bit. But our order is updating, right? We added something on our home screen or our appetizer list view, and it showed up in our order. Because again, that's what the environment object does. Your screens have like global access to this item. And then likewise, I can still delete. From there, we see our empty state, right? We're just manipulating that order that's up in the environment. So cool. That's kind of the basics of using the environment object. Let's clean this up a little bit though. Like I said, if we go back to our appetizer detail view, we want to dismiss the view. So we'll do is showing detail equals false. So we'll dismiss the detail view after we hit add to order. And we can optimize that even further for just user experience. We'll handle that in the optimization section. So let's test that real quick, just to be sure. Cool, we'll add chicken fingers to the order, add to order, and that dismisses and you're back shopping. Okay, and let's double check the order. Yep, chicken fingers are there, great. Now another thing I wanna clean up in the order view is this delete items, right? Because again, I like to have these functions like on my object that it's manipulating, because like we're only deleting items like from that order. So I'm gonna actually Command X to cut this function, go to my order, just like we had add, here we go. We're going to have a delete items, right? Instead of order.items, it's just items, right? Because items is right here already on the order. And then back in our order view, instead of just performing delete items, we perform order.delete items. And again, as always, let's test this real quick to make sure we don't break anything. Let's add chicken avocado spring roll, add to order. Cool, there's our chicken avocado spring roll. And we deleted. I just did the fast, too long of a swipe. That's why it looked weird. Okay, so the last thing we want to do, if you notice, our price wasn't updating on the button. So we can write a function on our order to calculate that. And this is going to be a computed variable because this is going to get checked and computed all the time. So we'll do var total price, and that is a double. And that's going to return. We're going to use items.reduce 0. And then the closure here is going to be $0 plus $1.price. So basically what we're saying is here is go through the entire array and add, as you go through, add all the prices up to one total, essentially. If you're not familiar with higher order functions and filter, map, reduce, I don't want to derail this because again, I was assuming some Swift knowledge, but I'll link to a video I did on it a long time ago and some other resources in the description. But what this is going to do is it's going to basically add up all the prices in our items array to get a total number. So where do we want to use our total price variable? Well, that is on our order view. And you see here our AP button, and like I mentioned, we're just hard coding the $99.99, right? Just to set up the UI. Well, now we want to replace $99.99 with our order.totalPrice. So again, string interpolation, order.totalPrice. And remember, we got to do the specifier. Specifier %.2f, and that'll give us our decimal places, right? We want 2 of them. So now let's run it and test this out. And I'm going to add like multiple items to the order, just to show the total. So Asian flank steak, $8.99, sounds good. Mozzarella sticks, $6.99, sounds good. Jumbo tater tots, yes. Meatballs, yes. Damn, meatballs are expensive. All right, anyway, order. Cool. Those are all 4 of my items. You can see it tallied it up, $42.96. And then watch, as I delete it, like I'm, $13.99 for tater tots. That's insane. Let's get rid of that. Cool, and you can see my price calculated and updated accordingly. And again, back to the environment object, that is because anything that is like listening to this, and what is listening to this? Well, our appetizer detail view is listening, right? The environment object, and then our order view is listening, right? The environment object. So any of these views that are relying on this order object, when our order changes, the UI for those views will also update. Again, back to the big picture of SwiftUI. Remember, SwiftUI is all about having one source of truth and then setting up your UI to react to whatever that source of truth changes, right? The data. So when the data, which is our order, changes, our UI is just going to react to whatever our data says, right? That's SwiftUI in a nutshell. And back to the simulator here. Just to finish this out, right? Get rid of the meatballs. Okay, man, $15.98, cool. Mozzarella sticks, so we should see $8.99, done. And then delete again. Now we're back to the empty state, so you have no items in your order. So our order is functioning. We injected it into the environment at the top level, so all of our child views have access to it. That is the basics of environment. And in the review section of the course, we're going to do a deeper dive into the environment to talk about other situations or examples on when you might use it. But something like this, having an order or a cart, on an e-commerce app is pretty common. So this was a good example to get you started, because even in those other examples, the concept is the same. Wherever you inject something into your environment, all the downstream views, all the child views are going to have access to that. Anything that's upstream from that view will not have access to that. So if they try to access it, it'll crash. Okay, that actually wraps up the appetizer app, right? Everything is functioning, the home screen, the account, the order. We're gonna come back and tweak some things in the optimization section, but overall the basic functionality is done, right? So let's add something to the order real quick, give us those tots again. In a real app, when you hit place order, right, this would send up a network call, to place the order, do all that stuff. Of course, I don't have a full backend database all set up for this, but you can imagine that's what would happen there. But anyway, hopefully you have a good basis to explore with this app. Start, trying to add features to it or change the design or just use this as a basis to play around with. And I hope that's what all of these apps over the past, 40 videos have given you. Just again, a basis to play around with and explore as you learn SwiftUI further.